This is Jim Horn with our continuing black and white photography master series. Today we have with us Rosemary H Williams, a self-taught generalist photographer. Began her journey in photography with early models like the Kodak Instamatic and Polaroid cameras. In the late 1970s, she acquired an Olympus OM 135 millimeter film camera, but it remained unused from the 1990s. Her passion for photography was reignited in 2008 when she bought her first digital camera, a Fujifilm Advanced Point and Shoot. Later that year, she transitioned to using various Nikon digital cameras and lenses. By 2015, seeking a lighter alternative, she switched to the Micro Four Thirds mirrorless Olympus OMDE Mark I, complemented by a range of Olympus lenses. Today, Rosemary uses an Olympus OMDE Mark II and resides in Hickson, a suburb of Chattanooga, Tennessee. Okay, as I said in the interview, I have with me Ms. Rosemary Williams. We're going to talk about some great photography that I had seen of hers in the June-July, I believe it was June-July issue of Black and White Photography. She had submitted some great images, and I thought we'd get her on the show and we talk about those images. Anyway, Rosemary, as we look at the image, I think you shot these in Cuba. Is that correct?
That is correct.
So when did you do that trip?
I went with a group of people from here in Chattanooga with a photographer that had done workshops there. It was November 2018.
Okay.
We were there almost a week, I guess.
Okay. And so then you got to see a lot of things going on. And you really, let's get into the images because I think that's what the people want to see. You took these images in a very unique way. Obviously, these are some dancers. So you came upon this scene, and let's talk about it a little bit. I mean, you chose to use a slower shutter speed, obviously, and talk about what was going through your mind.
Well, we were there to watch and photograph this like rehearsal practice. A guide had taken us there into this old building, so um, I was shooting, fast at first and looking at images and thinking they they were just there wasn't any drama or something with it. So I
Right.
decided to slow it way down and sit on the floor. And I had the camera on a tripod and just start picking dancers out to take photographs of. The men often had on skirts and were swirling them around. So for this particular image, you can see these swirls from the skirt as he would swirl it around. And of course, they're moving all around on the floor. And it was just, I wanted to get something that showed the movement and by way of the blurred fabric or themselves, rather than just stop action, just something different.
Well, as you lead into the next scene, obviously, you said two things that were, I think, extremely important. Number one, you got a different position than eye level. And that's always important, right? I mean, you
Yeah.
see it in a different way. And I think this really demonstrates it in this image. Talk about this image a little bit.
This one was a shot lower, of course, and I wanted to try to get the feet and legs. And I believe that left foot The shoe is fairly sharp, so it that's what I was trying to do, is get a bit of sharpness in some features. But then again, I wanted that swirl of the skirt to be blurred.
You tried, as you did in this image, the the swirl of the skirt. It's interesting because a lot of people do like what you were doing in the beginning, just shooting at 2/50th of a second or something like that, but you've made these images unique. I mean, they're blurred enough so that they're blurred enough so we see the movement, but we get the feel, don't we?
Correct. Yes, you know it is somebody dancing, but you get the blur to reflect the motion rather than just stopping the fabric in the motion.
Exactly, exactly. Now, I'll tell you, when I look, this is a great image, Rosemary. I mean, there's obviously you got the blur, but then you've got the two participants that are right behind that are really in pretty good focus.
Yes, you can see the guy on the left clapping. Well, I know he was clapping, but you can see his hand raised and know that it was moving, but he is in relatively decent focus. But the skirt, this one was spinning, and so you get the swirl going around.
Do you remember what shutter speed you were shooting these at?
No, I suspect what I did was it was probably F22, so the shutter speed would have been quite slow.
Okay.
Um, I would have left ISO at 200, but it was an old building in Havana. There was pretty good light coming from above, but it took slowing it way down to be able to get this.
Yeah, that's the advantage of digital cameras. You can shoot and look in the in the back of the LCD screen and at least be able to tell what kind of shot you're going to get, can't you?
Yes, and I am guilty of that from time to time.
That's
So
okay. That's okay. Everybody does it, Rosemary, and I think it's a good idea. I shoot some films sometimes, and it's sort of cross. Forgot how to do it. You sort of cross your fingers and hope it comes out okay. I think the digital's far
exactly.
better. I mean, especially Rosemary. This is probably you're not going to go back to Cuba every other year, I'm assuming. And so when you get there, you want to make sure it's right. Why did you, and I'll go to the next image, and look at that gal up in the left-hand corner as we look at this. I just think that's great. It's almost as if she's, yeah, that you make out her face. You can make out a lot of the detail. Your thoughts on this image and why you submitted it?
I think it's like you mentioned the girl in the back on the
Yeah,
left. It
right.
shows kind of like she's moved from one spot to another. Um, and I liked the just the flow of the fabric of the in the foreground, the abstract look of that. You can't really see any part of that person. You can see a leg of someone else on the far right, but I liked that almost a double exposure type look of the face in the back, and then right through the middle, that abstract um, motion blur of the fabric.
Yeah. I mean, it's a great abstract, and as I said earlier, I think in some cases it beats shooting at the high shutter speed. And what made you decide to shoot these in or convert them in black and white? What were your thoughts behind that?
I think because they were blurred in color, they didn't have that appeal to me. They just I don't know, they didn't look right. So I wanted to take away the color to focus more on um, the elements of the photograph and remove the distraction of the color. The colors of the fabrics were very bright, bright greens, reds, yellows, blues. And so when I took that away, then you could see the forms better. Um, and the contrast, say, in some of the with the darker and the lighter, without getting lost in all that color.
Yeah, I think you're right. I think the abstract of black and white adds a lot to these 5 shots that we've looked at. Now, when you and the listeners are always interested in this, what kind of workflow technique do you use? Lightroom, Photoshop, RAW, anything, maybe some other kind of photo processing software?
Well, these particular ones were processed in Photoshop, an old version of Photoshop. I have resisted going to the subscription Photoshop. I'm actually using Elements
Okay.
currently, a late version of Elements. But these, I use Photoshop, Nick Silver Effects Pro for my black and white. Um, Now that I use Elements, it does have a camera raw. Um, I've added some other softwares, but these particular ones would have just been Photoshop and um, the Nick Silver Effects Pro.
Okay. Yeah,
No Lightroom. I don't use Lightroom.
okay. Yeah, and I think there's always this, because Photoshop and Lightroom can do so much, I think there's always this misconception that to produce great images like this, first it takes your eye. You said, it was interesting, you said, hey, the still shots shot at high speed aren't doing it for me, so let's get creative. And you did, didn't you?
I did.
And
That was exactly why I changed, was to do something different. I think that everybody else was still shooting fast, but I just slowed it down and still continued to shoot with the bursts, continuous shooting.
and in your workflow technique, not and that, quite frankly, Rosemary, most people that come on the show, I'm surprised, but I can understand it. They don't get overly technical. Really, what I've seen, like yourself, they see the image and they shoot the image, and then they do minor adjustments in whatever software they're using. I'm saying minor. I mean, they don't, just as they do with your technique here. It's you shoot with your eye, and then obviously you've caught exactly the kinds of things that a lot of people miss. I'm sure some people miss those shots when they were there.
It may have.
Yeah, I'm sure. I'm sure they have. They have a lot of fast still shots, but you've taken something and really made a creation out of it. As I said, you're using the Olympus now. I know we have people that what I call the techno geeks. But you're using an Olympus now.
I am. I For digital photography, in the beginning, I was using Nikon. The gear was getting heavy,
Yeah.
and carrying a backpack around full of the heavy Nikon gear was getting old. And so I switched to the Olympus Micro Four Thirds mirrorless, and I've loved it ever since. I think it takes great photos. It's lighter in weight. I've got some of the pro lenses, they're good. Um, and it's ironic because my first serious camera was an old Olympus OM1 film, 35 millimeter film camera. And Olympus now has an OM1 digital out. And I'm trying to keep myself from buying a new camera body. And I
I
don't
hear
know
you.
if it's for sentimental reasons, but it is supposed to be fabulous.
Okay. This is. I'm sorry. I missed that. It's a new What model number
There
Olympus
is
is
a
that?
new Olympus model out, camera body, and it's just an OM1.
Okay. Okay. It's always that urge to get
I
a new.
know, I'm trying not to.
And eventually we wind up doing it, but I think as the listeners and viewers see that even your old camera body takes some phenomenal images, and it was really your eye that saw those, those great shots. And I think I hope you continue to work in black and white. I think I'm assuming you're going to retire soon, so you'll have a lot of time on your hands to do a lot of exploration. Is that correct?
That is correct. I retired at the end of 2021 from a paralegal job I've been doing for about 30 years. But then I started working part time, and I'm down to 3 days a week now. And but when I retire for good, I plan to get out and do a lot more photography.
There
Now
you
it's
go.
just weekends,
Yeah, and you
not when
being
it's
it.
100 degrees.
And you being in Chattanooga, you got some beautiful, beautiful stuff out there, and mountains and so forth. So I'm sure you'll have a great time. Well, Rosemary, I certainly appreciate you being on the YouTube channel. It was great to have you, and I'm glad you were willing to participate. And I hope you have some really great shooting days, and hopefully we can get you back on sometime.
Well, thank you. It was my pleasure to be here. I thank you very much.
Thank you. Take care.
You too.